Kartik.
Hey Crystal, how's it going?
Oh, it's good. It's like a nice 60 and sunny in Austin. I got my windows open.
Nice.
So I know when it's not 100 degrees, I'm always happy. How is not Nasic? Did I say that
Yep,
right?
you got that right. It's good. It's good. It's raining. It's raining quite a bit here, so it's nice and cool.
Oh, well, that's fun. I am so glad you're able to jump in and join us. And, coming to office hours and hosting this every month has always been was kind of an experiment. You and I started in January, February, and now I'm like, man, we've done almost 10 of these and we only have two more left for the year.
Yep, yep.
I can't
It's been
believe
it's
it.
been super fun.
I know. Well, I'm so glad you're here and I'm glad everyone here is joining us. If you're new to office hours, welcome. If you're an office hours alumni, Tawanda, I'm looking at you. Thank you for coming and submitting your questions ahead of time. We're so excited you're here watching us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. At any point, just drop your questions in the comment section and we will get back to you. We have Radhika and Danny behind the scenes helping us make sure we don't miss any. And if you have any questions after this, you can go to our Question Pro / office hours and submit your questions for next month. And Radhika is going to drop in our office hours landing page in the chat so that everybody can submit your questions. But if you also want to learn a little bit more about Question Pro, make sure you join us at X Day 2021 this fall. It's a digital experience for market researchers. This is the third one we're doing virtually and the fourth one total. And it's just a great time for customers, future customers, or enthusiasts of market research to join us and learn about just what's going on in the industry, what's trending, what new features or beta testing we're doing, because we don't talk about beta testing much on here, but X Day is definitely where you can hear about that. So make sure you register for X Day. We're going to have a guest speaker that I'm finalizing on Friday. Someone, who will definitely make you want to come listen, a little exclusive. But that will be coming out a lot, as well as if you love using Question Pro, please leave us a review on G2 Crowd. I'm sure everyone's used Yelp or TripAdvisor for, finding that best restaurant or that best hotel. G2 Crowd is like that for survey software or really any software. And we would love to hear your feedback on either on G2 Crowd. And if you send me an email, I'll send you a gift card. But you have to send me an email. So let us know if you want to do that. Kartik, do you have any announcements?
Nope, nothing from my side as such.
I figured I'd ask, but wanted to make sure. So let's get started. We have our first question coming in from Sharon McCarthy, and she's asking, I'm using a customer effort score of 1 to 5 and wanted to know what benchmark I should use to understand what's good and what needs improvement.
So typically when you're doing like a 1 to 5 scale, you will also maybe have a few follow-up questions, right?
Okay.
So for example, like if it was the hotel industry, overall, how's your satisfaction? You got 1 to 5. And then how would you rate us on, our pricing model, our service, our food, and maybe our infrastructure, things like that. And then after that, once you've gathered like at least about 1,000 responses or north of that, you can then do Spearman's correlation on Question Pro itself, right? So that would really tell you, which of the factors from the other questions you've collected data for will help improve your overall satisfaction the most, right? So it's called driver analysis. And let me quickly share my screen
I
and
was
show
like,
it to
you're
you
going to
guys.
start saying things. I was like, you better share your screen. Driver
Perfect.
analysis. Oh, here
So
we go.
let's
Let me add it.
go.
Hold on. Haven't added it to the
Yep,
stream. There we go. Oh, no.
perfect.
Go back. There we go.
Okay, so I could go to any of these questions or surveys. So let's say I go for this one. So it's like a
Mm-hmm.
research survey for mobile features. And here maybe I want to know, you know, are the comparison or what factors have maximum impact on likelihood of owning a smartphone? Just an example, right? So all I do is go into analytics, and this has about 670 responses from the US. So it's not a big enough
Okay.
sample size, but yeah, once you have enough
Yeah.
sample size,
Because you said
then
you
driver
needed
becomes
1,000,
a
right?
thousand and above is really where because at the end of the day it's probability. So the more the responses, the more accurate it's going to be, right? So
Yeah.
let's go here. Here you'll see correlation analysis. So you just go into that. So that's basically driver analysis, and you
Okay.
just choose your pivot question. So here I could choose, do you own a smartphone? And I want to correlate these versus everything, right? So I want to know which of
Okay.
the other questions have an impact on owning a smartphone in this scenario, right? And I can quickly run that. And here I could put my direct correlation or inverse correlation. Sometimes certain things have inverse correlation. So you can set up those threshold, and then here you the scores are essentially between kind of -1 and 1. So obviously the closer to 1 it is, the higher the correlation. The closer to -1 it is, higher the inverse correlation.
Gotcha. Okay. So that is definitely not a simple answer. So takeaway is collect the data, run driver analysis or correlation analysis off the 1,000 responses, and then that will inform your 1 to 5 scale later.
Yep, yep.
Cool. Good. It's like I really had to pay attention to summarize that one. Okay, so on to the next. When using the multi-point scale question type, is there a way to limit or exclude responses that can be selected in the additional rows?
Mm, I'll need a little bit more context here. I've not
Oh,
completely understood the question. So
all
if the
well, why don't we just talk about using multi-point scale question types then and give us your
Sure.
best practices?
Yep, so I'll likely show a few tips and tricks in general. So let's just go.
I do love a
Select.
tip and a trick.
So certain things that are very very easy to do and like a good practice is, so let's say for example, we're asking for income. So let's say it's a single select, uh, or maybe not income, like the which kind of credit cards do you use, for example, right? So we're gonna
Okay.
make it
Disney always keeps
multi-select.
trying to send me surveys to qualify me to do their Disney credit card. And I always like it cancels me halfway through the survey. No matter, I've got it like 3 times and I always get a different outcome.
So Disney, Amex, Visa, Discover, other, and maybe here, and here maybe I do not use a credit card.
They don't
So
want
now,
points.
obviously, when you're asking the question, when someone is answering, clearly someone should not be able to say, Amex, and I do not wish to, I do not use a credit card, right? It needs to be obviously mutually exclusive. So all you
Right.
do is you just come here and you will make this exclusive. So what this will now do
Oh,
is when I'm trying to answer, so if I do answer these, as soon as I select I do not use a credit card, it's going to deselect the rest.
I love that. I mean, I
And then
always
another
learn so
cool
much on
thing
this.
you could do here is all whenever you're asking such questions, you always want to randomize the options so that there's no order bias. So
Mm-hmm.
let's go ahead and do that. And now if I preview this, you'll notice that it's got completely randomized, right? But obviously I do not
Mm.
use a credit card should really always be at the bottom, right? So a simple way to fix this is just go back to that same drop down, and here you have the option called exclude from randomization. So
Oh,
now
so then it
all the
always keeps
options
it at the
except this
bottom.
one will be randomized. Yes, this is always anchored to the bottom.
Yeah.
There you go.
And using randomization helps with a lot of different things, like answer bias or people who are flying through surveys too, or even like quizzes.
Yeah, so in
Yeah.
general, right, when you're collecting data, right, you're banking on the fact that people are obviously answering it to the best of their knowledge, right? But obviously, you're going to get a certain degree of data, close to maybe let's say 5%, 10% of data, which is people who are just clicking through, right, who are not really taking the effort of answering, right? So for that kind of data, for that 10%, when you randomize it, so it kind of evenly spreads that, so it does not skew your data to any particular result, right? So that's the advantage of doing it. Clearly, if you're thoroughly reading and answering, randomization does not matter. But it's assumption that a certain percent of data is anyway not, and there's no way to catch that, right? Obviously, in surveys,
Yeah.
how do you catch, who's answered correctly and who's not? So the only way to kind of even that out so that it doesn't skew your findings is really to randomize options, randomize questions, and things like that.
I love that. I know I definitely have got caught in the randomization trick on a couple quizzes, and I was like, "Oh no, this is what Kartik's always talking about." It may or may not have been Question Pro certification, but because I was like, "Oh, it's just the second one." It was not the second one. So let's move on. Mike Kennedy, who's also joining us on LinkedIn, submitted a couple questions. So one, he said, "Can Question Pro measure how convinced people are when they're answering survey questions?" Now, this goes into a little bit of like theory and follow-up questions, right, Kartik?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not completely sure what's the exact question here. But how convinced someone really is can be measured by some level of scoring model. So, as an
Mm-hmm.
example, right, or instead of convinced, let's use satisfied, right? You go to a
There you
McDonald's
go.
and how satisfied were you with the with the entire experience, right? And there are obviously, let's say, 4 or 5 elements to it, cleanliness, service, speed of delivery, and taste, and maybe price or something like that, right? And for each of these
Mm-hmm.
5 categories, maybe you have 2 or 3 questions, right? So what you can essentially do is score each and every kind of section separately and then kind of get a cumulative score. So for every person, you'll kind of know, if the total score, if obviously the total score possible is 100, and maybe 80 and above is the closer he is to 100, the
Mm-hmm.
the better or the more satisfied he's been overall, right? So it's not based on any one question, but how he's answered the whole survey.
Right.
And I'll
I mean,
quickly
in
show
a
you.
perfect, oh,
Hmm?
I was like, in a perfect world, if Ken was here, he would say, "You need a CX program." But that's a little plug for CX. This is technically office hours for surveys. If Ken wants a CX office hours, he can join us later. But yeah, how to walk us through some scoring examples. And this is using the surveys platform for these kind of like satisfaction, like customer satisfaction questions. Can be done on our advanced license and higher or on our free license?
Yep.
Wait, no, that was a question. Can you do
So,
it on
so
our
it,
essentials or is
it's
it
both
advanced and
essentially.
higher?
No. It's
Okay.
essentials and higher.
I was like, that
So
was a
we
question.
we have essentially 2 types of scoring, right? So now let's say this is your question, right? And if I go to logic, and if I go to score, so now just simply scoring this, so maybe dissatisfied is -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So
Okay.
this will basically for every question you get the score, and in the end you'll get a cumulative score automatically. So this you can pretty much do with any license. But then we also have something called section scoring. So here you'll see store score in, and you can basically store it in different sections, right? So for example, service is one section, pricing is one section. So you can kind of create those sections and kind of get different scores for different sections. So that's a little bit of advanced scoring that you would need kind of advanced or higher for.
Okay. And would you recommend mapping out this scoring before you program your survey?
It wouldn't matter that much. I mean, either or,
Okay.
really. But I think it's easier. Like once you program the entire survey, at least that's what I would do. The easiest is to just go into your review mode. Just take a look at the survey, see which section has how many kind of questions, and then you can determine how you want to score it, right? Because if pricing has only
Mm,
3 questions and service has 5 questions, then obviously you need to kind of weight the scores accordingly.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So, as kind of like a part two of this question, Mike
Mhm.
asked us here, I'm going to pop it up on the screen. How do you predict future behavior and confirm credibility? Will you recommend us? Kind of what we're trying to do with G2 Crowd.
So again, that's I mean kind of different ways to do that
Yeah.
realistically. So depending on the nature of the study, what's the purpose of the study. So just as an example, like if I was researching, mobile features, right? And maybe a year back, I was researching about the capability of a smartphone to fold, for example, right? Which is obviously very very relevant today, but maybe a year or 2 or 3 years back, it was just an idea, right? So
Hmm.
obviously. You ask questions around that and obviously see the level of agreement or excitement to that based on different questions, right? And that gives you some sort of kind of predictability and stuff like that. And then you could use advanced theories like you could use a conjoint, right? You could create kind of different profiles, and one has one smartphone, price $1,000 can fold, and the other smartphone that cost 800 cannot fold, but they have the same specifications, right? So things
Hmm.
like that will help you kind of understand, how much of a factor really is the folding, how much people are willing to spend extra. So you can do all of those things with a combination of, just simple questions. And then if you go into advanced, you got things like conjoint analysis. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's fairly complex. But I mean, you could do conjoint, you could do
We could do
some
like
level of
5 office
supercapture.
hours on conjoint.
So there's obviously based on the purpose, there are different question types,
Yeah.
different ways you could collect data, and different ways you could then analyze it on the back end clearly.
I love that. Well, good to know. And thank you everyone for asking us questions in live time. I know it definitely gets keeps us on our toes to say the least, which is always nice. Yes, that would be another example. You're right. Like, would you be asked if you could get a COVID vaccine? Lots of different things. Surveys, I really think people underestimate them as just collecting data when really surveys can operate as so many other experiences. Just because we call them surveys doesn't mean that you're like engaging with it as a survey, in my opinion. But that's because I see them out
Yep.
in the wild now and I'm like, that's a survey, but they're like calling it just like a something else. um what are some other like ways people use surveys that you find surprising, Kartik? Why we move on to our next section.
And there are a lot of, I think, different ways I've seen. Obviously, the one way I've seen a lot is like assessments, especially like a COVID assessment, where
Hmm.
you kind of answer different questions. In the end, you'll get like a risk score and stuff like that. So obviously that looks very very fancy. It seems like it's a great software, but realistically, more often than not, it's just a simple survey with obviously very very clever programming. No doubt about that. Um, so that's I think the
That's
most relevant one. I mean, it's funny. Like even like in India, like the official kind of assessment that the government does on their official app is actually just powered by it's just a SurveyMonkey survey, which in the end gives you a score, right? And I was like, man, we are 1 billion people here, and they couldn't spend a little for some deep analysis.
I really I like that a lot, actually. So I mean, I think that just like shows that there are so many circumstances in which we use surveys, like in real life, IRL, and you may not realize it unless you're like really looking at it from a different perspective. And now that kind of leads us into what we're going to be talking about as our highlighted feature of office hours, extraction logic, and kind of just going through why extraction logic is useful and what a difference it can make in your survey experience. And if you have questions about any logic, make sure to drop them in the chat window. We're just highlighting this one because we feel like it is something that, the average user might not use all the time. And so we want to make sure that you know all the best tips and tricks. So, Kartik, tell us a little bit about extraction logic. When, how, why,
Absolutely.
and what to do with it.
Yep. So I think the key benefit of extraction, right, is really when you have complex surveys, right? When your questions are, north of 30, 35, 40 questions or more,
Oh,
right? And at that time, what happens is, you've done a lot of logic, you've set everything up, and obviously everything is interlinked, right? Based on how you've answered one question, then you have a few follow-up questions, and then those follow-up questions again have a few follow-up questions. And then typically what will happen is you then send that to review, maybe to a manager or maybe to a team who then suggests some changes, right? And then doing those changes is going to take 2 3 hours because you have to go do the whole thing again, right?
okay.
So I mean, there's nothing that extraction can do that general normal logic couldn't do, but obviously it gets it done at 1/10 of the time. And in some cases, like we work with Epic Games, Riot Games, these guys, they have like 300 400 question surveys, and they're all interlinked, right? So typically when they have to make any changes, they just change one or two or three questions, and that affects, or that's like a chain reaction for the entire survey, right? So I
Mm,
think that's the key benefit of extraction, and I'm going to quickly show you a few examples and how you can set it up.
I love it.
Perfect.
uh,
So yeah,
no, keep going.
yeah. So let's take a very very simple example. So let's go to a select menu, and
Man,
let's
you love
say
credit
which.
card questions. No.
No, this time I'm going for ice cream. I love ice cream too. Uh,
Ooh. I had a great debate with friends about this last Tuesday. Because someone was ready to die on the hill that mint chocolate chip was the best ice cream. And that is not the hill you should die on. And then a bunch of us got picky because it's like, what brand of ice cream? So it's like, I like vanilla Tillamook, but other people were like, no, I like vanilla Bluebonnet. And then it was like, then it got
exactly.
very
Yep.
complicated.
So that's when extraction is going to help you at least when you're setting up the survey.
Woo!
Perfect. So let's go for some traditional flavors. So chocolate.
Gross.
Uh, and again, the list could really go on. So let's just say,
Blueberry ice cream?
yeah, but we get it here.
No.
Uh,
uh, what about mint chocolate chip?
we get that too. It's my favorite. Mint chocolate chip is like my favorite flavor.
Rocky Road, Moose Tracks? No, it's like we're gonna get too far down the rabbit hole. You didn't even put vanilla on here. What kind of ice cream
Oh
aficionado are you?
yeah. Cool. So let's say this is the list, and obviously, typically, you might have a much larger list, but let's just
Yeah.
say this is the list. And then based on what you select, you want to ask, okay, let's say I see the select. I want to know, okay, from these, then which is the best for you, and then what would you like to have, when you're feeling low, what would you like to have when you're celebrating, and there are different things you want to obviously understand as a brand who's obviously researching in this space, right? So what I'm
Right.
going to do is go into logic, and I could go into extraction. And here we need to first select what do you want to extract, right? So typically it is, whatever options are selected, those are my follow-up questions. Sometimes it's the opposite. So it's whatever questions are left behind or whatever options are left behind. We want to kind of do some more follow-up on that. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just want to extract everything. I mean, those are niche
Extract
cases. So I'm not
everything.
going to go into that. So let's go into selected choices. And now to which
Okay.
type of question do you want to extract into, right? So here, let's do firstly a ranking. So this,
Little bar. You're like, excuse me.
let's do a drag and drop. And here we
Okay.
have this function called locked extraction. So what this essentially does is when this is locked, then any changes you make to the source question, so now this question that we've added becomes the source question, will automatically reflect on all the others. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So let me
Oh.
go ahead and save this.
Always save. That's like one of my.
So this gets added, and now I could just say, okay, uh, drag and drop flavors, reference, and that's it. And maybe I
Ooh.
want to do another extraction also. So I think there was one question which asked, could you do multiple extraction? So yes, you could just go back
Mm-hmm.
to the source, go back to extraction. Let's again lock it and select it. And this time, maybe we'll do uh, matrix multiple select.
Let's do it. So you can extract, you can take the like original question and extract it multiple different ways.
So here we could ask something like this. And here we could put like the columns would typically be your moods. So here I could do maybe happy, sad, anxious. uh,
Breakup. No, that's
Perfect. And now we can quickly just answer this. So here, let's
let's do
say I personally like coffee, vanilla, and chocolate, and butterscotch.
it.
So here it's okay. When do you consume the following? So let's say butterscotch, happy,
You can't be happy
happy,
for all of them, Kartik.
sad,
That doesn't help the
anxious,
example.
and vanilla always. So no specific reason. So something like this. And then order of my preference. So obviously vanilla is always first, chocolate chip probably second, butterscotch third, coffee last, and done. Right? And again, you could have arrays of this. And similarly, like now from your extracted questions, you could again do extraction, right? So I could say, okay,
Oh,
the the
extraction on
ones that are like
extraction.
ranked first, I want to extract that or stuff like that. So I can also do extraction on extraction. And now so what will happen is, okay, you've submitted this internally, and now we need to add a couple of flavors, right? So that's when locked extraction helps you. So if I go ahead and add an option, and let's just call this whatever flavor 10 or whatever, and now you'll notice that this got added to the matrix as well, and it's
Ooh,
got added for the ranking as well. So it also kind of saves time where you don't need to sit and redo the whole thing again just because a few flavors got added. And the same works obviously if I go ahead and remove this.
I love that. So, but you have to put the locked extraction on there to make
Correct,
sure.
correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So because if you do locked extraction, what happens is then you cannot edit these. So if you come try to edit it, it will tell you to edit it in source. So there's no way to edit these
Mm.
extracted questions. So if
Because
you're
the
planning to like
source is
edit it,
your question
yeah,
one.
correct. Correct. And that determines all other extracted questions. So you can no longer do edits here. So if you want to do edits here for any reason, then you could not use logged extraction.
I gotcha. I gotcha. That's like dropped a lot of knowledge there. I don't know if I can summarize it. The takeaway is blueberry ice cream is a thing. One. Two, you can extract You can do many forms of extraction on your source question. And then you could even extract from an extracted logic question.
Yep.
Yes. I
Got
just
that
used the
right?
same words. I think so. I love that. So if you're, what happens though if you have certain termination kind of ideas built in? So you want to let's say if somebody did pick mint chocolate chip and you're like, we don't want those people. How do
So let's take a
you
real example, right? So let's just say we have, I do not like ice cream, for example. So
Ooh,
anyone who says this clearly should get terminated from the survey. So you
yes.
just go into logic, like
And
nothing
life.
changes here. So the exact same steps like you do for any other termination, right? So you just go to the option and disqualify them. That's it. So you can do any logic, and you could do compound branching, simple branching, show height. So you can do any logic on extracted questions. That's not a problem at all.
Cool. I love that. And so, how do we then, after you've had the right amount of respondents fill out your survey, what does the analytics look like as you kind of like dive into the data of it all?
So it's no different than any other traditional survey, right? So like I said, extraction is just it helps you program faster. So it's really more of a programming thing more than it is like any kind of data structuring or interlinking. There's no interlinking of data per se or anything that changes from the data collection perspective, right? So let's say you have
Perfect.
10 questions and they all are extracted from each other, and then you have the same 10 questions but they're not extracted, so the data output would be exactly the same, right? So nothing really changes when you have extraction uh, added, right? So obviously, when you have looping, things are different. So like, if like I had like a set of questions, and based on the flavors of ice creams I've selected, the questions are looping that many times. So that has a major impact clearly on like the data output and
Hmm.
how we need to read the data. But extraction again, like I said, is just a programming kind of simplicity thing. So it just reduces the programming time, by 90% sometimes.
Ooh, that sounds that sounds like it would be useful.
Yep.
And then on as far as like Question Pro licenses are concerned, where does this start at for extraction
So it's
logic?
any of our paid licenses essentially.
Great. So advanced team edition on our service platform. And then obviously you could dive into it with research edition, connecting with Dan Fleetwood and his team, and higher. I was like,
Yep.
I don't know what goes. I was like, and after that, Dan can help you. Um, that's awesome. Is there any um like secret tips and tricks that you like for extraction logic, or one of your like, I always recommend this to someone who's building a survey and wants to use extraction logic? Is there something that you keep to yourself that you'd want to share with the class?
There are a lot of complicated things that I do, but I'm pretty
Oh,
sure that just going to confuse everyone too much, right? So I
okay.
think I think the key thing on extraction is I would recommend like as much as possible, simply use locked extraction.
Mm,
When you don't use locked extraction, and then when there are 4 or 5 different extractions, you lose track of which question is extracted from where, and then sometimes you'll go make some minor cosmetic changes or just remove or add an option. And then by the time you find out, you're 2, 3, and 400 responses in, so that kind of gets wasted. You lose time, you lose sometimes money if you're like purchasing the data. So my
mm-hmm.
strong recommendation is just like use locked extraction as much as possible. I frankly don't see any reason why you would not do a locked extraction. But I would say like as much as possible just lock it, so you're forced to kind of edit the source question and you don't need to worry about like all the other questions. You just change some one and you just focus on one, and everything else is automatically taken care of by the system.
I love that. And if people want to learn more, they can always email sales@questionpro.com or support@questionpro.com. Our our guys and ladies, sorry, I was like, wait, words. People like Kartik, are more than happy to help you, and we're always here to help as much as we can. Especially like giving you just the tips and tricks to be better survey creators. That's really what we're here for, is we want to help you use the platform to the best of its abilities, because I know it can be painful to Kartik. I know you've seen some surveys where you're like, if you would have just done this, if you would have just known. And that's a big reason why we hold office hours. It's because we don't want to hold the tips and tricks to ourselves. These are for everyone. But I think that's all. The only last question I have is, what does the data look like if you download it in a CSV file? Because I know a lot of people download data, but you said earlier that the analytics and everything already look the same, so it should be fine, I would think.
Yep. So nothing exactly changes. So I'll just quickly
Yeah.
export data for this survey.
Perfect.
So let's do that.
You take surveys so quickly. Analytics, manage data. I was like, oh my gosh, we should
my account alone has 4,000 surveys and at least 100,000 responses. So, and then the client surveys I've done are different, right? So just too many surveys that I've created in my life.
I definitely used a survey for my family vacation when we were trying to rank where we wanted to go. I felt very proud of myself in real life.
Yep, I actually even ran a survey while naming my daughter, and then I also did some weightages where the older people got a bit more weightage and the friends got lower weightage. I did all of that stuff also. Because I
did you actually use one of the names?
Paternity leave. I did. I actually named her from the result of the survey. I literally did do that.
Kartik, your commitment to surveys is over the top, and I love it. There is a TikTok challenge going around that's spent hours and hours trying to name my daughter, only to call her Bubby.
Yep, so here's the data. Super simple, perfect. Super clean, nothing really changes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kartik. You have answered all our questions about extraction logic and more. And we are so grateful to have you as our Question Pro. And I think that's all we have today. Super quick office hours.
Yep. And if anyone has any questions or wants to do maybe a one-on-one call with one of our experts, just send an email to support@QuestionPro or sales@QuestionPro. And within maybe 30 minutes, someone will reach out to you.
On the record, within 30 minutes.
If not sooner, I'm just saying 30 minutes because I'm on the record. If I was on a personal call, I would say 5 minutes.
I was like, wow, you gave me your I was like, I have too many emails for me to get through. So I'm glad that's your job and not mine. I just get a plan fun things like this. But thank you so much for joining us, Kartik. Really appreciate your time. And I will see you back in 2 months for our last office hours of the year.
Sounds good. Looking forward to that one. And I think that's going to be in December, right?
No, we're going to skip December. We're going to do November.
Got it. Awesome.
November. December has too many holidays and shenanigans.
Yep, I would probably not even show up.
So, well, good to know that we're not doing it. Yeah, so we only have 2 more office hours left for the year, October and November. And then we will start fresh back in January 2022, which I cannot believe I'm already saying. I've already had to start thinking about it. So, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Kartik, and I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.